Yellow, 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 everybody! How are we all doing? Oh no, my border has disappeared. Dang it. Well, doesn't matter. How's everyone doing? Hope everyone is doing great today. We're in for a pretty chill feedback session so far. It looks like we have, how many people do we have today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, we've got 9 people today. That's awesome. So we can take our time today a little bit more. Hello, Kovalinsky. Hello, Connor. Hello, Louise. Hope you're all doing well. I've had a pretty chill day. So usually, oh, I need to watch my mic a little bit. See if I don't like spike or anything like that. Don't want to be doing that because I changed some stuff up. So let's see. Let's have a look here. Let's do some settings on the fly. Gained in behavior. Hey, see ya. Yeah, so what I was saying is that, Wednesday is usually like the chillest day of the week because I tend to work like the least amount of hours so that I get like proper time to chill in between work and an actual Whip Wednesday. And then I tend to catch up in like the rest of the week. So yeah, today was pretty chill. Did some, what did I do today? I did some, I'm currently writing onboarding for the workshops that we're doing. So before it was all email based and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's time that we kind of switch to, hey, we do like initial outreach. We let people know, we talk to them, and then we send them like all the information that we have and they can read through it like on their own pace. So I've been doing that. Just background stuff, really. We had our team meeting yesterday as well, which went really well. We talked about the course a little bit. The course is making some really good progress. We're getting really close to getting the first lesson out there. I do need to do some website work probably this weekend, and then we can hopefully get it out like pretty soon, because that would be pretty sweet. So yeah, keep your eyes on that, because that's going to be, I'm excited for that. I'm honestly really happy with where we are now. We still need to do like a couple of tweaks here and there, and then we can finally start testing and get the show on the road. Oh yeah, also during this session, we'll see if we have like any disconnects. We had a bunch of issues on Sunday. We'll see if it's like still happening. I've basically done all that I can on my side, apart from replacing PC parts, and I'm not going to do that. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, otherwise it's going good. What else is happening in the world? Yeah, not much. It's actually been pretty quiet, you know? Pretty quiet. Just on the grind set, you know, just keeping busy with everything. Hello, Dad. It's good to see you here. How is everyone else doing in the chat, though? Is everyone doing okay? But yeah. So yeah, that will mean that like next week, hopefully we can do some like really early testing with like a couple of people for the first lesson and then get it out there. That will be freaking awesome. That's the current goal. We're also, actually, so we got the next team challenge coming on, right? We've planned our dates. We know we want to do the next team challenge. We kind of have the ramping up is happening. So the team, well, Sunny is like gathering a bunch of stuff. We have like our kickoff meeting like pretty soon as well. So we're gonna try something new. In the next couple of days, we're gonna try something new. We're gonna experiment. So what we're gonna be doing is the next theme will be decided by you. That means that we're gonna have like an anonymous vote out of X amount of options, and then we're gonna let the community decide what they like the best. and then we'll run with that as a theme for this time. So we've kind of have like a selection of like the thematics that we really enjoy, and then we'll just leave the rest up to the community. We're not going to reveal the theme until the kickoff though. That's remaining the same. So we have all the votes, and then they all go into like an invisible thing that no one gets to see apart from like the organization. And then we will reveal the theme once we actually kick off like the team challenge with like everyone involved. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. It's going to be really interesting to see what theme gets picked by the community. So yeah, we'll set up a little poll in the next coming days, something like that. That would be cool. But yeah, that's about it. So we kind of have that coming on. The course is making some. We're good on track with the course. Really happy with how the presentation came out Sunday as well. Even though with all the technical difficulties, all that kind of stuff, I think it was really interesting to see how it went, how people enjoyed it, how much engagement there was, like how many people were talking during the chat. I think it was like a big success. So that means that I just have to do more now. So yeah, I've got a topic in mind for next month. And then we'll do it on like a monthly basis at this point. And then we'll see what we're going to do with that timeline, if we can adjust it a little bit. But yeah, just a quick overview of everything that's happening. Let's switch over for some feedback though. That's why we're all here. Team challenge, yes. Yeah, I think I'm really excited for the next one. The next one is going to be very interesting. I'm curious to see how many people sign up. Curious to see how many people we have this time around, because yeah, I don't know. It's hard to gauge. You know, it's hard to really gauge what is going to happen. Let me see. How was the audio today, people? If you can give me some feedback, like are there like audio issues or anything like that? Like sometimes I see myself clipping a little bit. So sorry if that happens. I don't want to destroy your earlobes. Well, not the lobes, I guess, but maybe we'll have to have a look. It's all good. Okay, you already know I'll throw my hat in the ring. Let's go, see ya. Sounds good on this end. Okay, cool. We'll just continue then. Oh. Haven't had any audio issues. That's good. That is good. Okay, cool. Let's get into the swing of things. So, a quick introduction. If you're new here, this is our weekly format where I go through like what the community posts for this week. So basically every week people get to post their work, and then they can ask me for feedback. And yeah, it just happens on like a weekly basis. But if you are not a part of the community, feel free to ask any questions or bring anything up during this session as well. I'd love to have like a little bit of a conversation in between people getting feedback. So if you have any topics that you want to talk about or anything that you're worried about, let me know and we can chat about it. If it's, well, it doesn't have to be game industry relevant, but ideally, you know. Cool. Okay, let's switch it on over to Nicholas first. Nicholas is new, or at least I haven't seen Nicholas's work yet. So yeah, so Nicholas is saying, "Hey, I recently joined the community. Oh, one thing, I'll join the voice channel as well. So if you want to come up to the stage and join me, you can do so if you want to. So we'll call it whip. We're not gonna let everyone know. Cool. Sweet. So we're in there now. Let's have a look at Nicholas's work. So this is a project that is based on the streets of Molise in Italy that I started in December last year, but due to my work and my studies, I had to take a few breaks and came back this month to continue. Okay. The narrative of this place is about these small villages in the countryside that seem to have stood still in time, with a few stores and houses nearby. Inspiration mixed between the streets of Molise, Campoposa, and some paintings from Venice. Okay. As for the visual development, my goal is to achieve the visual style in Assassin's Creed 2 or Brotherhood for the Monte Regione village. But the techniques used in that recent version of the franchise. Okay. At the moment, I've completed the level design and blockout, and I'm at the art blockout stage. So if there's any feedback on the composition, scale, storytelling, or even some suggestions for the next step to make it more interesting, it would help me a lot. Okay. So we're going to be talking about... What do we talk about? So composition... Composition, scale, story. Let's see, composition, scale, storytelling, or next steps. So that's what we're going to be looking at. So composition, we have like a couple of shots here. This one is by far the weakest from all of them, I would say. The other ones, they kind of have like something really cool going, right? So you have like this visual of the church. If we open that just a little bit more, because what we want to have is if we're talking about shapes, right? We kind of want to do this, right? We want to have contrast between all the shapes. So that's what we're trying to do. But now we're like intersecting with this a little bit. So if you give that a little bit more space, that could be really cool. If you got this second staircase going up as well, I would potentially block that up like a little bit earlier. Because this doesn't lead anywhere, right? And it does take a bunch of attention to itself as well. So if you can either like maybe even like curve it more to the right so that you have like a staircase here, and then there's like a staircase that kind of goes up here, like behind the buildings. Something like that could also be interesting potentially. What I'm trying to do is I want people to realize earlier that this is not like an interesting point to be looking at necessarily, right? So that's why I'm thinking about like blocking this off earlier. Yeah, so basically the top of the staircase where you are now, I would honestly just like curve that staircase and just like have it go in like a different side. So that it becomes like a little alleyway that kind of curves up. It also saves you like a bunch of time with having to like set dress and like make all that stuff. And it makes it a little bit more dynamic, right? Instead of having this like really long like sideline. So yeah, we wanna block that earlier. And sort of make it feel like a visual dead end. It's not a real dead end, right? But it needs to, for our composition, I think it needs to be like a visual dead end so that we can say like, hey, look, there's nothing really more interesting here, right? So we can just leave that here. That shot is pretty cool as well because we kind of have this like very like triangular shape that kind of leads us over here. It would be cool. I'm going to ask a question here, right? Like, what is the payoff? What are people looking at? Like, what are you trying to push them towards, right? Because we have this beautiful composition, but you kind of want to give them something there, right? It doesn't always need to be like a big focal point, but maybe it is just if you're inspired by Venice, right? I'm not sure. There seems to be like a little bridge. Yeah, so that's like a very typical motif from like Venice, right? So You scammed us. You said you will stream every month and you streamed again after 4 days. Oh, sorry, Zayad. I was gonna do one of those specific streams, like those lessons. That was gonna be happening once a month. But yeah, I usually stream like once a week at least. So it kind of depends on the schedule. I'm always around on Wednesday. Every month I'm around on the first Tuesday, and then also that Sunday as well. So yeah, sorry about lying. Yeah, but we're talking about the payoff here, right? So what do we want people to look at? We got this like Venice motif, so that could be like a cool thing of just like indicating like, okay, there's more than just like streets. There's also like water happening as well. So just make sure that that is like the payoff that people are getting, right? Could be really cool. But I was saying in the beginning that this is probably like that's probably the weakest one, because I know that we're focused on like the restaurant, and this could be like a good additional shot, right? Once we got like all the set dressing and all that kind of stuff in place. But right now it does feel empty, and it's just, we're just looking at a big block that is going to be a building. But if you imagine that there's going to be like signs and there's going to be stuff to do on the tables, all that kind of stuff, this can be a really good composition. But at the moment, there's nothing of interest here, right? Compared to the other shots. But if we have, I don't know, if we have like a cute little sign and there's like menus all over here, right? So you got like a menu board, maybe got one of these guys standing over here. And then maybe there's like stuff happening on the table. Maybe there's also, I don't know, I'm thinking about like some like Greek or like Italian gardens where you have like just like these clusters of lights. Right, so you have like this drapery of like lights just like bouncing all over the place. Right, and now this becomes more interesting. Right, so now we're getting a little bit more of a setup, and then this is like a bunch of text on these guys. It's gonna be like a drink with like a nice straw on here. So that's what I would do. Like I would definitely try to already in this stage get a good idea of what the final result can be. What I would also do in this case, let me see how this lines up. Is potentially make this building a little bit wider. Just because we have like a massive open space here. That is just really distracting, right? What I would, or you can just move the camera, right? So that like this whole area is like more in your face, but I would definitely take care of like this empty area. Cool. Nice. So composition, the scale of things. I think you can definitely emphasize the scale of the church. If there's one thing to emphasize. Because the thing that is so beautiful about like Italian towns is that you have this sense, like it becomes like your orientation point, right? Because everything is so much bigger than ever, like the church and the town hall and like everything like that is so much bigger because it's essentially like a navigational point for the town, right? So that's what I would do with that. I would definitely emphasize the scale of this thing here. Like in this one, it's beautiful, right? But here, we're not really seeing like a big difference between like the top of the house and like this thing. So that has to do with like the placement or the scale, right? In this one, it works fine. Because we have this like beautiful silhouette, right? In the other ones, you just need to tweak it a little bit. Either give it more space and then see if that works. And if that is not enough, then you might have to like emphasize the scale or something like that. I'm glad you're streaming. Thank you, dude. Yeah, thanks for being here, Zayat. I appreciate it. So yeah, saying, yeah, oftentimes the church was just the center of the town. Yeah. It's usually like the church or like the marketplace or something like that, right? And usually the two together make for like a really good combination, right? Because you have an open space next to a big thing, right? So it emphasizes the importance of that big thing. Most of the time, the church, the town hall, whatever. Yeah, the story is bare bones. At this point, there's no story to me here. Like you have what I call, it's like it's focused on the functionality, right? So you kind of have your what would I say? It's not even a story. It's like the function of the city is clear, right? It's like an old medieval town. It has like all these like tiny streets, but there's no story. It's still missing like the story layer. So that one, honestly, to me, is like really missing. That's why I did this like little thing here, because now we're getting to the soul of the place, right? Like we're getting to grips with like, oh, it's this kind of place compared to a place that's abandoned, because we're adding a layer on top of it. Because a block out itself is not going to convey a story, right? That's not the reason why we do blockouts anyway. A blockout is to confirm like the gameplay elements, right? Usually done by level designers to confirm that like the gameplay works, all the cover mechanics work, like all the navigation systems work, and you can easily navigate the whole space. And then we come in and we give it purpose and we give it a soul, right? So at this point, a story, that still needs to happen. But yeah, thanks Nicholas for posting work. Let me see if there's anything else. Yeah, you were asking for some suggestions or next steps to make it more interesting. So I think this is basically what I want you to focus on, right? Like get all the assets in that you need to get a little bit of a feel of the place. And really look at the individual functions, right? So this place is a cafe. Cool, we got that. But who's running it? Whose cafe is it? What kind of vibes? Like all that kind of stuff. And we can kind of do the same thing for a lot of these places. So let's say this beautiful building here, that's the jeweler, right? I'm not saying that you have to give like every house a purpose, but it helps you reflect on like, oh, okay, so that's going to be that. So maybe I'll add like a sign on the outside. Cool. And then we have like this cool looking sign on the outside that signifies that this is like a jeweler, right? Cool. Then we got like a couple of just normal houses just for filling up stuff, right? And then maybe this one is like a pharmacy. Right? Like I kind of want to feel like, okay, it's not just like a block out. Sometimes it's nice to give purpose to buildings. And you can give purpose with like really simple things, right? Like just like a couple of bikes, maybe like a couple of plants, whatever. Just set dressing can already give purpose to a house, because that shows that the person that lives there loves to have a garden, but they're living in a flat, so they can't have a garden. So what they do is they put plant pots outside and they just have like a bunch of them, right? Cool, that's a story. And it's just like a couple of assets, but it tells something more, right? And then we can do the same thing with, yeah, ideally what we then want to do is like reuse the stuff that we're going to be making throughout the entire space. Last thing I'll say, don't underestimate the amount of work this is going to take. I don't want to scare you off. Anyone can do it, but you have to build a plan. And what I would even say at this point, do an early test. How long do you think how long is it taking you so far, and how long is it going to take you in the future? And then triple that. Because that's going to be closer to what it's actually going to be. Right? So if you say like, okay, like I think this is going to take me 3 months. That might mean that the actual timeline might be closer to like 9 months. There's this law that says that you have to basically triple everything, and even if you're aware of that law, that you still need to do it anyway. So if you like build for that law, it still works out the same way. Now, there's like a whole bunch of shortcuts that we can take, right? Like sharing textures, all that kind of stuff. Like we can definitely make shorter work of it, but starting with a good baseline of like, oh, I think this is going to take me so long. And then planning for that and actually using workflows that are going to be quicker. That would be my recommendation as well. But yeah, thank you, Nicholas. Going to be moving on. Zayad is asking what software is used to make this block out, because I love the measure grid. Oh, there we go. Bye. So that is just Unreal Engine. It's just a material that's on it. So I think that is the material that Tiago Klavke uses, like from his course. I don't know if he has it available somewhere, but let's open all this stuff back up. Yeah. So yeah, I would say have a look at that. Like have a look at Tiago Klavke's course, or maybe he has it like somewhere. Cool. Dat, you are in the chat. Do you want to come up onto the stage? Hello. Hello, Dat. How are you doing?
Timothy. Good, man.
What have you been up to this week?
So I got the tree into the Unreal scene, and I basically reworked the composition. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, you didn't really rework the composition, right? Like you lit it in a different way, from the looks of it.
I moved the mountains around so they weren't just randomly positioned. I moved it so like that they actually created somewhat of a leading line to the middle of the scene.
Got it.
Does it achieve that, you think?
Yeah, we can start there. I mean, they're very spiky, right? So I think what you are going for kind of works, but you kind of want to soften it up a little bit so that it's like a nicer transition. So what that means is that you have, let's see if we can do like a sketch. So you have like a big mountaintop here. That's kind of what it would do, right? Rather than just having like, we're basically turning like two spiky mountains into just like one continuous like one continuous kind of thing. And then we're gonna smooth it all out, because it also helps in terms of the feeling of the place as well, right? Like if you have like a soft shapes, it makes everything feel like softer and nicer, you know? And you kind of, that's played into like how we conceive things like emotionally, right? Because you want this place to have like serenity, right? So if we then have like a lot of spiky shapes, that's going to take away from that serenity, right?
All right.
So we can kind of do the same thing here as well. It doesn't need to be like so dramatic, right? We can kind of scale it down a little bit. But overall, I like what you're doing with it though. So having that like sort of like fishbowl effect, or like that smooth gradient that brings you into the scene, that could work.
Yeah, okay.
What else? What else can I help with?
Any notes on the tree?
Any notes on the tree? I think honestly, I don't really want to focus on the tree. I think the tree looks okay. It's just the lighting, the lighting updates that you've done, kind of make the scene feel like really flat now.
Yeah.
So in the previous one, you kind of had like this nice contrast between the shaded areas of your canopy and like the foreground and the background, right? Right now, everything is kind of just like the same sort of value. So I think if we look at the previous one, let me just get that in here quick. There's more contrast in between like all the different shapes, right? And it makes like the artwork, it makes it more interesting to kind of have a look at as well. So I would definitely try and find like a way of not going back to it, right? It's just bring it back so that there's more separation between like all the different layers that you wanna set up. So usually
Like
what
more
happens.
highlights.
Sorry, go ahead.
So like more highlights around each of the shapes. So like there's an easier separation, I guess.
That is one of the elements that we can play with, but I wouldn't say that that's like the beginning that we're gonna play with. Because that is more something that is already like at the end of when, if we're tweaking lighting, right? Like that becomes like so detailed that we kind of want to do that at the end. So you kind of want to have like a lighting scenario that puts like the focus, or like the main focus of the sun, like the light that's coming from the sun, on the tree itself, so that we can kind of have like a solid basis of that already. Because now we're hitting the top of like the canopies, but is the light coming from like the back of the tree? Kind of looks like
It's
it.
coming from the top right of the scene.
Yeah. So what I would do is I would just have like a frontal lighting, so that we're lighting up like the front of the tree, right? So that we can, I don't know, we're trying to light up like the most interesting part here, right? So if we can light up this space, and then potentially have like more darkness on like the back of the canopy, that could potentially be interesting, because I want to have some contrast on the tree itself.
All right.
And then we can start tweaking. Okay, so I kind of have like my main focal point like lit up. So if the main light is going to be here, now we can look into, okay, how do we separate the foreground and the background from the middle ground more? Usually the foreground, I tend to do it in like shadows, right? If we're doing like a simple exercise here, I would honestly just put more trees that cast more shadow onto the foreground, right? So if your light is coming from, let's say, this direction, right? The direction that we're going to be putting it in, that means that you probably have to put some trees behind the camera so that they cast like some sort of shadow onto the foreground, right? Because we kind of want to have certain areas of shadow like in these areas.
Gotcha.
And then we can put like some other stuff as well. If we then put, I don't know, like more bushes or more trees in the foreground, we can start blocking it off more selectively, right? So we put like a couple of trees down here, maybe a tree in the foreground to kind of block it off a little bit more. With blocking off, like what I'm also doing at the same time is I'm pushing the viewer into the frame, right? So that's what's happening at the same time. And then we can do the same thing on the right. And then we do the opposite for the background, because now the background is like really clear. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna push that even more in the background by adding more of like an atmospheric fog into it. So that is just like tweaking your like atmospheric fog that you have in your scene to make sure that there's like a lot of seemingly distance between your foreground, your midground, and then your background. We're getting to like somewhat of a good spot over here on the right already, but I think that's honestly more to do with like the bloom of the main sunlight that we have. We kind of need to get some sort of effect so that we see like a little bit of the mountain, but we kind of want to have like less contrast there because we kind of want to fade it into the distance so that we get this like overemphasizing effect on the distance that we have in our scene.
Yeah, I was planning on making like fog cards and cloud cards later this week to try and do that. Actually, was my goal for this week.
So it's one of those things that we can do at the end, right? Because those are like very specific things that we can use. I would use a base atmospheric fog first, because that's going to do it scene wide. So I would tweak that first. And then if you then want to do fog cards and all that kind of stuff on top of that, that lets you like be more specific with where you wanted some fog cards, right?
All right.
So we basically always try to go from the biggest effect to the smallest effect. So that's why I'm focusing on, we need to get the sun angle sort of right, because that's the biggest effect on the whole scene. And then if we want to do more specific stuff, we can go down onto like things that have like more specific effects. So like, I don't know, like filler lights if your scene needs it, or fog cards if your scene needs it, like all that kind of stuff.
All right, cool.
But yeah, that's like the basic like setup of like most scenes, right? So foreground is usually dark, like a dark shape. And then middle ground is usually where your brightest spot is going to be, because that's where your focal point is going to be. Right? So because we want to, from like a value perspective, we want to draw people into the middle ground. So that's going to be the brightest spot. And probably also like the most contrasted spot as well, because that helps us. And then the background is where we want to have like less contrast, and it's also going to be like the lightest one as well, because the further something is in the distance, especially on like a clear blue day like this, the bluer and the less saturated it's going to become, to kind of sell the effect of it.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we can do that. Like, I would do that with the atmospheric fog. I would set that up, see that you get somewhat going on your mountains already. And if you then, I don't know, you start struggling with like tweaking the numbers in the atmospheric fog, I would then physically just move the mountains way more back until you get like the effect that you wanna get.
Gotcha. All right.
Awesome. Anything else that I can help with?
Not at this moment.
Okay.
I think I'll definitely tweak it with your notes and then post it in the chat later this week just to see if it looks better, and then get ready for next week.
Yes, sir. Do it. Looking forward to the changes, man. It's gonna be good.
Thanks, Timothy. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too, Dad. Talk to you later. Thank you so much for coming on, Dad. I appreciate it. I think that's a really valuable lesson. Just foreground, middle ground, background, like structuring every piece like that. That is something that is going to be, that can be applied to like so many things. Yeah. Thank you for coming on that. Let's see, we have questions in the chat. So Toa is asking, how is that massive tree even unwrapped with UDIMs? No, because we don't use UDIMs in games. We don't do that. I think for now, so ideally, the way that you should do it is by making the most of like tilables. Use that as a base. I think the way that that is currently doing it is by kind of going for like a rock kind of sculpting technique by using like a unique normal and then using the tilable on top of that. If I remember correctly. Hey Camille, I'm new here. It's awesome to have you. Oh, there's that. It's 2 meshes, each one with a 2K texture, then blending a tilable texture on top of it. Hey, there we go. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Camille. It is awesome. Glad to have you here. Hope you're doing well. Conrad B is saying, I think Epic has a bunch of materials like that in the sample project. Maybe it's called Supergrid. Oh, could be. I've never used the material myself, so I have no clue. But it is really useful though. Just to have a grid, even without the numbers, is super useful. Especially when it scales based on the world space, right? Hey, Zayad, yes, we actually do. So you can become a member in the description down below if you want to. Because yeah, we do have a lovely community server. You get like a whole bunch of stuff if you join up as well. Feel free to check it out. Let's keep this train on the road. So next person we have today is, let's see, let's start from the top. So we've got Louise. Where's Louise? There we go. I'm not sure if Louise wants to come onto the stage today or not. It's totally up to you. In the meantime, what are we working with? There we go. I see someone joining. Feel free to raise your hand and I'll bring you up on the stage. I can just invite to speak, I guess.
Hello.
There we go. Hello, Louise.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello? Uh-oh. Technical difficulties. Oh no.
Hello?
Hello, Louise. How are you doing?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can also hear myself in the echo as well.
I don't know how to fix that. Sorry.
It's all good.
Last time it was fine, but today is a bit messy today. I don't know why.
It's all good. Let me see. What can I help you with today? You had a couple of questions, right?
Yeah, it's about because you have some feedback for the conversations last week. So I just start to make you can see there's the characters, there's some not the characters, like there's a subject in the scenes now. As you can see, I focus on one of the lighting is focusing on one of the plates, so it makes you feel like something happened there.
Mm-hmm.
You feel so?
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge change compared to last time, right? It looks way better now. It looks way more focused as well. So I think that's actually really well done. The only thing that I would keep in mind is that the current composition, right, for this shot that I'm currently looking at is very left-leaning. So that means that basically all the interesting stuff is happening on the left of the scene, whereas the right is pretty much dead. So usually a way to kind of keep them in balance, or at least the way that I tend to do it, is using like the rule of thirds. where you can say like, hey, I have one of my subjects over here and then one of my subjects over here, because that means that we kind of balance the scene in a way where it's nicer to look at. That's why, or like it's more equally balanced, if we use those terms. That's why I was a bigger fan of potentially using this table, for example, because then we're moving the balance a little bit more to the right, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you mean I can push something more to the right to make it more to fit the ratio.
Yeah,
Is that right?
that would be another option for sure. So we can. That's the thing. We have like a bunch of options as like artists, right? So we can do whatever we want with that, really. So that would be like another option as well. So that's totally up to you. So either you move like the main focal point, you move that a little bit more to the right, because another way of looking at this is that the way that the structure of the scene is now, let me see, is that you have a lot of leading lines, right? You have a lot of leading lines kind of taking you towards here somewhere, let's say. That's also why I was a bigger fan of this, because now we're kind of leading you towards like the back end of the room very subtly, but there's nothing really happening there, right? So I think either you redo like the composition with the camera, that would be an option, or you balance out the composition a little bit more by putting more stuff in the on the right. But I think honestly the best option would be to have, for this shot specifically, to have the focal point more on the right, because the whole scene is kind of pushing you towards that.
Yeah, that is a good suggestion.
So yeah, the way that you solve that is up to you, right? Like what you want to do there. But you do have options. And then let's see. But I do really like what you did with the main focal point. This is a cool story, right? Like we don't really know what happened or to who or like who did it. But this is nice. Like this is telling me like, hey, this is not like a nice place. This is not like this is not a place where you want to be, right? It's playing into the emotion of the whole thing. Yeah. Let's see. One of the big feelings that I have right now is that we're still dealing with a lot of stuff everywhere. So there's still work to be done by like focusing up like certain areas and clustering more areas together. So for example, this is the only table that matters, right? So if you want this to be your focal point, I would potentially just remove a lot of the stuff from all the other tables and kind of just keep like little bits and little things that barely take up any attention, so that all the attention is going to go here, because that's what we want, right? And then also potentially do the same thing with the TV as well. The TV currently is like one of the brighter spots of the scene. That also means that it's going to take attention to itself, right? Just by the brightness, for example, the brightness first, but then also the contrast of having this bright spot in your scene contrasted with like darkness around it as well.
Yeah.
So,
So I should turn off them.
Yeah, or you put it like closer together, because you can still reuse it, right? You can use a TV and you can kind of do like a makeshift thing where they put like a bunch of chairs on top of each other and then put the table, not the table, the TV on it, because they kind of just made like a makeshift like table or whatever, because they love watching it. Or maybe they moved like, I don't know, there's like a second table or like another chair where it just has like a TV on like a stand, right?
Yeah.
And then we're pushing everything like closer together to where it matters, rather than having everything still spread out. But there's so many ways that we can do that, right? So what is the best way of explaining this? I always look at it in the big term of contrast, but contrast can happen in shapes, it can happen in colors, it can happen in textures, it can happen in, it can happen in so many different things that you kind of want to have most of the contrast, no matter which type of contrast it is, around the focal point, and then keep the rest of it like easier to read comparative to the focal point. I know that we're going like very, very high level here, right? So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. What I'm doing right now is everything is just a bit greedy.
Yeah.
Like I want everything in the scenes, but it seems like if I put everything inside of it, that would be very uniform and lots of focus point, as you say.
Yeah. And you can still do like a lot of greediness, but I would just cluster it. So for example, the majority of let's see, how are we gonna do this? Yeah, I think we talked about this last time, maybe in a different way, but so you can still be like, hey, the table is gonna be full of junk, right? There's gonna be like a bunch of stuff on the table, whatever. But that means that we need to keep like the rest of the floor like really clean. And maybe even the back of the area like really clean. So that whatever we want to do with the table, it becomes like a little island of props by itself. And then we can have like some, I don't know, some like boxes or stuff like next to it. That's fine, but we need to find a way to then balance it. So we're going to go very abstract for a second, just to make sense of this a little bit more.
Yeah, maybe some junk on the floor randomly.
Well, yeah, it's about like how we spread that junk on the floor, right? That's the issue right now. Because what we're doing is, it's going to be very abstract, but bear with me for a second. What we're doing right now is this, right? But nothing stands out. There's nothing that really pushes you or like takes your attention, right? This is the way that we're currently looking at the scene. There's a lot of stuff happening everywhere. What we kind of want to do is have like a dense cluster surrounded by maybe like less dense, and then maybe have like a couple of other clusters of like dense stuff. Because you can already tell from like a very abstract view that what is happening is that, oh, we have 3 points that we can kind of look at, right? We have one, that's the biggest one, and then we have 2 like secondary ones. But with this one, we don't really know what we're supposed to be looking at. And that is what currently is happening in the scene. I hope that makes more sense.
Yeah. So what you mean is make something bigger for the focal point, and now the way is more smaller, but they're still a cluster of stuff.
Yeah,
And
so
then
let's talk about
something.
that could be an option for sure. It doesn't necessarily need to be that, because I don't necessarily want you to make like a bunch of new stuff too, right? I think the way that it's currently structured is we need to reduce the amount of noise in the rest of the scene. So that just means maybe rethinking like the amount of like decals on the floor and like the amount of stuff on the floor, or maybe even the pattern on the floor, right? Like finding a way that we can soften that pattern a little bit, so that it blends in more or something like that. And then also having like all the junk on the floor, we kind of want to move that in like a couple of areas so that it still looks chaotic, but it doesn't distract from like the main focal point. Right, so let's do an exercise here to make it clear. What I would do here is I would remove these random cables, I would remove the decals, and I would remove the chairs. And honestly, potentially even the lights. And then I'll start thinking about like, okay, what do I want people to focus on? I want people to focus on this box of machetes, right? So you want to tell like a secondary story with that box of machetes, which is cool, right? I like that idea. Then we just need to find a way of like, okay, how do we create a light so that this makes sense without us like forcing these lights in the scene, right? Because the issue with the scene now is, or with this screenshot, is that we focus there, right? So that's where we are drawn to, because there's not a lot of light around the focal point to kind of draw us there again. So that would be the first thing. And based on that, I would kind of look at like, okay, I want to tell a story that this is like a box of like bloody machetes, right? And then you can reintroduce that decal. And then maybe we can have like some blood coming from like the actual boxes, right? We do like a decal on top of this. And I would then potentially look at a light that like highlights the roughness of that blood. And that would be like the way that we focus on this scene, right? So it's like very limited. It's more subtle rather than your eyes being pulled like in so many different directions, right? Because even if we zoom out, we have these guys, but even if we were to remove them, the bigger windows in the back, they're still going to take up a lot of your attention too. So that's something that we then have to balance out with a stronger light in the foreground again.
Yeah, the first, I mean the heater, the light from the heater for the first is not exist, because it just like some of the light from the top like lighting up down, and then and I realized that for this shot everything is so dim, so that's why I make this up to like bright the floor, maybe more brighter, but I feel like it's very intentional. But I'm still thinking of, because the distance from the light from the top light to bright up the boxes, the craters, is quite difficult to just doing in the shots. So I'm thinking of what another like artificial light I could put in to make it more like that is the subject. The box is the subject. That
Sure.
is really hard to me. Like how to highlight the blood on the box. Where is the light source from? That is the difficult part for me.
Yeah.
To think of.
I would first think about the placement of it, right? So that we can kind of nail that down. And then we just have to get creative, right? What I mean with getting creative is this place looks like people are just making whatever they want out of this place anyway. What I would then do is be like, okay, we want some kind of light. Let's say, okay, we're going to do a very crude setup, right? There's like an outlet here. And then someone has plugged in like a light that kind of goes like above the camera. And then like comes down here, and then they have like a light bulb or something like that coming down here. That could be like one of our options. Right, so you could kind of use like the cables in a way where you can say like, hey, this is where like a light is coming from. That could be one option. You could also have like another option of maybe even a light that we don't see, right? So like a light that is like off screen, like to the left here. So let's imagine that there's one of these guys even, right? Like one of these heaters. We could have it like off to the side here, but it's not visible, so we don't have the issue that like this bright spot is going to take our attention, but it still comes into the scene, and that allows us to highlight this space up, right? In this way still. So that could be another option. Yeah, or even making use of like the TVs, so that you can imagine that like people are like sitting here in this corner with like a lit up TV, and that's like lighting up this space with like a very subtle like light coming from the left. So there's a couple of options.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. A lot of things to do.
It is. It's sometimes what I try to keep in mind is that less is more, right? We want to be able. I know this was like a very simple representation, but this, honestly, this is what a lot of my work comes down to. Is like, where do I want people to watch, and how do I get them to watch that specific place, right? And clustering, that's what we bring up here, is like one example of that. So it's not necessarily that you have to do a lot of work. I think it's just using the assets that you already have in just like a slightly different configuration. So it's not that you have to create new stuff, which is a good thing.
That makes sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries, Louise. Yeah, I know that we went through like a whole bunch of like random stuff today. I was a little bit all over the place, but does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Awesome. Is there anything else that I can help with as well?
Maybe that will be over time for this, because I also want to ask about the because I intend to do the stylized art for this environment, these pieces, but I'm not sure you feel this is more realistic to you more than a stylized.
Yeah, it definitely leans more towards stylized, more realistic than stylized at this point. I would not be worried about it for now. You're so far along in the project that it's too late to change it anyway. And also, like, if you created like all these assets, if you created like all the assets with the right intent from the get-go, it might also just mean that this is like the style that you want to do. So I don't think it's bad, right? And maybe for the next project, you can be like, hey, I want to go like full stylized. I want to go, I don't know, hand painting or something like that. Then do that in the next project.
Yeah, maybe I just focus on doing one props with fully stylized, because that would be I used to do like realistic stuff, so stylized to me is more difficult, because you have to think of like fully stylized, you have to handcraft yourself, hand painting and whatever. That is another way to go, and there's a lot of stuff to learn as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will take it next time. Thank you.
Well, the thing is, like with stylized work, what you're gonna run into there is you have to art direct, right? Like if you don't want to do like something that anyone else is already doing, you have to art direct, and that is really tough, because that just means that you have to do a lot of iteration. Whereas like with realistic, what you're mostly doing is you're trying to get as close to like the reality of that asset as possible, right? So yeah, it's usually way more difficult to do anything stylized, because you have to come up with like what style you want to do in the first place. That's the really difficult part. But yeah, I would say best of luck with that, Louise, but I would keep it for the next project. That would be my opinion.
Yeah, look forward to that. But first I have to finish this.
Yes, you got this, Louise. I believe in you. I know that I made it sound like way bigger than my intent was, but yeah, it's not that much work. And I believe you got this, Louise. So best of luck.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on as well. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry for the echo today.
Oh no, it was only the beginning. That's all good.
Oh, okay. Because I turned on and off of my microphone. Don't
I
worry,
saw.
that fixed.
Yeah. Thanks for doing that anyway.
No problem. Thank you, team.
Take it, Louise. See you next time. I'm looking forward to the next update. It's going to be cool. Nice one. Thank you, Louise, for coming on. Got a couple of suggestions here in the chat. Cole is saying change the default viewport to cinematic viewpoint, and then yeah, you get like the roll of third grid and all that kind of stuff. That's really cool. Maybe have the heater with its back to the camera. That could be cool. Yeah. It comes down to like, hey, we have this bright spot in the scene that we don't wanna attract like all the attention to it. So we kind of need to find like a clever way to hide it, right? And that is the beauty of like an artist, right? Because we get to be creative with that stuff. Now the difficulty comes in when you have to do this in like a game where people are actually going to be running around, because then the restrictions become like way tougher because we don't have a dedicated viewport, right? So yeah. So it's good lessons to learn now. All right. Let's keep it moving. So next one up is, let's see, let's go in order. Next one up is Ethernet is better. Ethernet is better is asking, I'm not very sure about the transition between the collapsed and the intact roof. Okay. So this is going to be like a relatively quick one. So we're going to be dunk, dink, because it's basically just about this guy over here. And it's this section, I think, that they're referring to. So I think the broken ceiling here looks good, like the broken roof. I would potentially have like a couple of like corrugated, like random things happening over here, like just a couple of panels, you know, like one or two. That could be enough. And then if you're worried about like this transition, right, I would honestly just have like a piece of a beam stick out, and then just have like another beam over here, and then maybe just like another one. Because from like a shape perspective, what we're doing then is like, oh, something fell over here and that caused this roof to collapse, right? Or just like the amount of time or whatever happened, like it just like caused the roof to collapse. And if you think about a roof collapsing, it usually just like caves in, right? So once you have, we're basically trying to go for like this kind of a shape. So yeah, with just like a couple of things, we can keep it very clean. Yeah, that's all you need to do, honestly, to get that looking like nice. And then you can apply that to so many other different things here, right? Like if you wanted to do the same thing, we would just need to break up the silhouette and just be like, okay, this panel is missing, this panel is missing, and then kind of just decide like where you want to break it all up, and just be like, okay, that's where you want to break it up, and then reveal some of like the structure underneath, right? And then there's like beams coming from that way as well, and then you can just like clean up the interior again. And now we have like a beautiful silhouette that's kind of just like much more striking, right? If we quickly do something like this. I mean, I think you were talking about like the back of the building, but here we go. Because that's the most important thing about the building, right? Like, or like any sort of asset is a silhouette. So that's all we need to know. Cool. So we got the silhouette change. Yeah. But that's about it. That was the only question for today from Ethernet is Better. So thank you for sharing your work. We're going to be moving swiftly on. Hey, Ben. Sorry, I didn't see you there. Connor B is saying a box of loose machetes is a vibe. We've all had those days, you know? Come on, don't lie to me. Hello, Hudson. Good to see you here too. And Cole H is saying it looks like the TV texture may be on the glass mesh. Oh, I see. Yeah. You want to have a separation between like the actual glass on the the TV, and then you have like the plane of it behind it, right? Yeah, that does make sense. You would you can be like very specific with like the camera angles as well if you want to avoid that too. But that's a good point. So yeah, just a reminder for the people that have joined, feel free to ask any questions about environment art, game development, being an artist in the industry, whatever you want to know about. And then we'll move us swiftly on. Next one up is from Alvin. So Alvin is sharing a mug. So thoughts on the prop, any details I should add or remove, and how are my base maps? So the base color, the roughness, and the metallic. I had a look at this before the stream, and I like the way that you're doing your roughness. I would, let me see, what was the scene gonna be about? Yeah, it depends on how dirty you want to make it, right? What I would do when you have this sort of stuff, that looks nice. That looks nice because it affects the base color, right? That's the reason why this is so like apparent, because even with the roughness, with the current lighting information, like we don't really see any roughness information or roughness variation rather. Even though you have it there, right? Because we can see it. We can see it here. So Hey, Alvin. Welcome. So yeah, it's just really tricky to see. It's not that it's not there, it's just that it's not visible. What I would say to make it like a little bit more visible is add base color variation. And what I mean by that is, you know, like you drink from your mug and then you have like this little spill of just like tea that kind of comes out of it because you spilled. And then it kind of created like a little pool down here. And then you can kind of reflect the same thing on the side as well. So that you have like, and this would be like the side where it like spills out, right? But yeah, something like that, something like very subtle. That you can be, okay, yeah, someone spilled, and then maybe there's like a bigger puddle here. Something that just makes it like interesting, right? Other side is coming in saying, hey, it's not really a question, but thanks so much for the handbook. Like, oh my God, it's the best thing in the world. I refer back to it all the time when trying new techniques. That is awesome, Other side. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Glad you enjoy it. And thank you so much for saying so. That is awesome to hear. That generally makes me happy, you know? If people get like a lot of use out of the book, that is awesome. But yeah, like I would add like more base color variation here. And just try to make more use of the different channels, right? Should I add liquid inside a cup or just the spills, do you think? Just the spills. I think I would only add liquid inside of it if you're going to do a close-up, but then you're going to be spending a whole bunch of time on making that liquid look really good, and that is really tricky. I would honestly avoid the liquid and probably even like push the stains a little bit more. Just have like more stains at the bottom of it. That's the way that I would go. Yeah. We gotta overemphasize and Yeah. We kind of need to make it like gamify the thing, you know? Like we need to overemphasize like certain elements, like having spills and all that kind of stuff to make it like more interesting as a prop. Especially if we're gonna show it this close. Cole H is saying, oh good. A good point. I meant to order that today. Hey, thanks, Cole. That's awesome. Amy Animations is saying, hey, Animations. So welcome. How are you doing? VLCG art, at first it was... oh, sorry, I missed a thing here. So in my experience, I have a nice result by playing with the specular value derived from the roughness. Sometimes it helps with the read of different material surfaces. At first, it was to avoid the plastic reading of the landscape at great distance, but even for props up close, it looks great mixed with Fresnel. Yeah, yeah, that is true. It becomes very difficult though. I mean, I do agree that like a 0.5 just as like a specular value for anything out there, not the greatest recommendation, but it also becomes like very tricky to then, I don't know, go into it and tweak it yourself if you don't have like the actual values, right? Because then we're playing around with like another map that we have to tweak, and at a certain point I would guess that, especially in the beginning, what do I tweak now? Is it the roughness or is it like the specular? Because I don't know at that point. I mean, like you're saying, you can derive it from the roughness, right? So that will potentially help, but I bet that people will tweak it. So I had a saying, I don't know if this should be low poly, but I can see the plate outer edges. Yeah, so you can kind of see it a little bit, but honestly, the majority of it is going to be fine, especially depending on how close you're going to get, right? Everything comes down to, like, if I want to emphasize something from this, is camera distance. Is super important. It's a mid-poly that we shouldn't get close enough to see the edges. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter at that point. But everything depends on the camera distance, right? Because if you have like a camera distance that is like going to be pretty close, we'll add more edges. If you're going to be further away, you might even add like, you might have added like too many edges, honestly. But yeah. Thanks so much for sharing, Alvin. It's coming along nice though. Yeah. Nice one. And then thank you, Andrew, as well, for sharing like a couple of tips in the little thread there too. It's always appreciated if other people help each other as well. Let me drink some water first. Okay. Let's see. Malta is next. So, I'm mainly wondering about the presentation for today. Since this is a tool, I'm not sure what to present first, the tool or the render. Any thoughts on how I should go ahead with this? The project is also two projects, with the buildings and the windows being combined into one scene. Well, okay, I'm gonna ask a question first, to kind of help you think through some stuff, right? So, hey, thank you, Kami. Thank you for subscribing. That's awesome. So the first question is, are you ever gonna use windows without the buildings? Right? Because the buildings, they don't function without the windows, right? So just from like a tool perspective, I don't get why they're two separate tools. Or if they're like integrated into each other and you can split them apart, that's fine. But in my opinion, there should just be like one tool, and then you can split off the the Windows itself as like a separate tool if you wanted to. So that's just like a side comment, right? But also, thank you for putting these back on YouTube Live. Much appreciated. Yeah, no worries. No worries. So let's see. So I think the best solution. So that was kind of just my random comment on that, right? So the question really was what should I present first, the tool or the render? In this case, what you always want to do, that's the way that I've always structured anything on my portfolio, is you want to wow people first before you then hit them with like the boring detail stuff, right? Because if you think about it from oh my god, that's not gonna land. I was gonna say like a sales funnel, right? You have X amount of people clicking on your thumbnail, and most of those people are just going to be interested in like the art, right? Because they don't expect a tool to be in that post unless it's like clear on the thumbnail. Then you can kind of change their expectations, right? But most of them, if you're going to hit them with a render as a thumbnail, they're going to expect like some cool art to see, right? And if you then hit them with like a bunch of like tool stuff, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, okay, I'm just going to go somewhere else. Not that matters that much, right? But I think it's really interesting to have like, hey, here's this cool shit that I made, and here's how I did it, right? Rather than, oh, here's how I did like all this random stuff, and then show them cool shit. Because then you're expecting them to scroll down into the post to see the cool stuff. You kind of want to hit them over the head with that first. So I would say render first and then the tools. Right, and then the project is also 2 projects. We kind of talked about that before. I think the best solution is to make 2 posts and go in more specific detail for the respective tool. If you are planning on doing that, make sure that there's enough content to actually dive into what you're going to be talking about. Because I'm not a big fan of just like, oh, here's this one project that I split up in 2 because, I don't know, reasons? If there's a lot of content and you're doing video breakdowns and you're being like very thorough, break it down into like separate things, right? Because then you're adding, again, like we're talking about like sales terminology, right? But that's kind of like the way that I look at things now, is we try to add value to things, right? And the more breakdowns and the more content and the more details and like the interesting the information is that you put into it, that is value that we put into the ArtStation post or your portfolio, right? It's value for helping other people. It's value for a company that wants to hire you. That's what we focus on as like commercial artists, right? That's where we get our jobs from and our whatever. Like that's why people reach out to us. So if you split them up, there needs to be a lot of value in the individual posts. So if that happens, then that's fine. If it's not, make it one post. And then we're kind of spiraling at this point, it seems like. So finally, I was wondering if I maybe should do 3 presentations. I don't think you should. I don't think you should. You kind of see, the way that I see it is like the scene is like the marketing material for the tool. So that's the way that I would use it. I would not split it up into like different things. The way that I could potentially see it is if you have 2 posts where, again, you do like a whole bunch of really cool looking renders talking about the individual tools, but I can already see from like a distance that what are you going to do with the windows, right? Like the windows are fairly limited in how cool you can make them look good because we're missing the buildings that they kind of go on. So that's the way that I'm looking at things. So I would kind of keep it to like 1 post or maybe 2 if you can justify it. But I feel like in this case, it might be hard to justify. I would honestly rather have like a very detailed, like very juicy, very well thought out 1 post that is like even broken up with like banners and all that kind of stuff. Really think about how you're going to present the information compared to having 2 of them. And then lastly, any general thoughts on the lighting and the fog changes? I tried to brighten it up a bit. I think what we need to do, maybe we've been approaching it a little bit wrong, is that all the focus is still going to go here. We need the focus to be here. We need to brighten up that spot. We need to add like fill lights or anything in here. I think we talked about that last time. Did we? No, I don't think we did. Never mind. I'm lying. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. But that still needs to happen. Like, we need to find a way to bring people here. Because what you're doing now is like, hey, I made this really sick looking building generator that's all the way over here. But I want you to look here. Look at this cool bridge in the fog in the distance. Right? We need to find a way to bring them back. We need to put the focus here. That needs to be the brightest spot of the scene. And I think the concept actually did it really well. If I can remember the concept, let's have a look. If I can find it really quickly. Yeah, so, I mean, that's not the original. Yeah, let's see here. See what the concept does? Sure. This is still bright. But this is also really bright. If we do a where are we gonna go? Black and white. Right? And then yeah, we can kind of already see it, right? Like if we zoom out, you can kind of start distilling it, right? So the reason why this stuff stands out is because the contrast of the buildings that are like right next to them, right? Even though the light in the bay is probably where your eye is going to go first, that second point is also like very enticing because it is contrasted by the dark buildings, right? So like that contrast attracts our eye. Whereas if we disable these two and we disable my painting, there's nothing like that, right? And the stuff that I'm doing now, by the way, the zooming out, is a very good way to objectively look at your art and see where the attention is going, because we're not getting lost in the details and the shapes and all that kind of stuff. It's literally just, where are we going, right? So we want to do something like this compared to something like this. Right? That's where we want to go. So we need fill line here. Yeah. Thanks, Malta. Thanks for putting up your work. And let's keep it moving on. Let's have a look. So who's next? We got Harry next. So with Harry, I think we're going to talk about like trim sheets. I don't know if... Oh, so just a reminder for people that are participating in Whip Wednesday, feel free to come up onto the stage if you wanted to. If you don't want to, that's fine. So Harry is thinking about, the trim sheets, right? Oh, let me actually bring up his work. So we have these trim sheets over here. And I think what you're struggling with okay. Sorry about the spiraling questions. It's all good. It's not about the spiraling questions. It was more about like, I was hoping that you weren't spiraling. Of just like, oh no, how many things do I put on my portfolio? Ah! As long as that doesn't happen, I'm good. Okay, so I think here, Harry, Deadline's in 6 weeks, so plenty of time to mentally spiral as well. You got time. We're just gonna increase the pressure, every week. What I was gonna say here, Harry. We're gonna have to simplify this. The reason why I'm saying this, and I'm gonna be very open here, is this is the first time that you're gonna be using trim sheets, right? Let me double check that actually. Yes, it is. Yeah, so, and the reason why I say that is because this makes sense from a unique texture approach, if that makes sense. Like, that's the way that you would kind of set it up as like, oh, this strip is going to be that. This strip is going to be that. We have to take like a broader approach, and we just have to be like, hey, I need a couple of pipes, so I'm going to have like a couple of pipe strips on there. Cool. I need wood. The wood that can be shared between all the wooden elements in your scene. So the window frames, the door frames, whatever is wood in your scene, that's going to be on there, right? And then you have metal stuff, like metal strips. And that can be used on like the cabinets, the lights, the gas tops, like all that kind of stuff. You can then use that in that way. I'm going to give you a couple of options. The way that I would do it right now, because I know... That's why I'm saying we're going to simplify this. Because I still want you to do like a trim sheet. But I would honestly focus on, what is going to be the easiest thing to do? Okay. We're going to do a metal trim sheet first. We're going to just split it up. And we're going to use the metal trim sheet like on these pipes and on these guys. That's all we're going to do. Once you have that, I want to then see you take that knowledge and apply it to potentially the other surfaces. Because we need to get you into the trim sheet mindset first. Because we need to basically flip what is happening here, right? And that means, hey, get this stuff in. If you think that like, hey, I got like all my pieces that I need for a metal, to make like my metal pipes and stuff. Well, actually, no, not even for the pipes, because the pipe is going to be slightly different. Do the window frames. I am honestly tempted to yeet the idea of a trim sheet altogether. I don't think I want you to do that yet. The reason why is twofold, right? You've not done a trim sheet, and this is also an environment that doesn't really work that well with trim sheets. It's not like one of those projects that is like, oh yeah, this is 100% trim sheet simulator city over here. You can do everything in the scene by doing it uniquely. And it will probably be easier, and it's going to look better. So from that perspective, I don't want to burden you with trim sheets. If this is like your first trim sheet that you're ever going to touch, I would honestly pick a project that is better suited for the trim sheet. So I would honestly ditch the idea of trim sheets at this point. Based on the context that we have today, right? So because what matters is if you want to learn a new technique, which is all fine, but the most effective way to learn is not by doing a full environment. I would rather you do I don't know, like a wooden jetty or something that is more akin to what a trim sheet is supposed to be used for, right? And then once you know how that one thing works, now you can apply that knowledge to like anything else that you do in the future. Because the reason why we're having this conversation is it's cool that you learn a trim sheet, but that's going to take you a lot of time. And it makes it way harder to actually finish this environment. So sometimes what is the best way to like actually finish something is just by doubling down on your comfort zone and then just getting better at things as well, right? So you want to focus on improvement. Honestly, that's it. Like if you're already struggling, I mean, it's fine, right? Like this is, I'm talking from like a non-judgmental space, right? I've struggled with trim sheets before. I mean, we did like a podcast, like what was it, like 1 or 2 weeks ago, where I basically just said that like trim sheets, I didn't even know that they existed until I used them on accident. So yeah, you're talking to a person who was in your position as well. Well, even worse than your position, to be fair. But yeah, I would rather see you, apply them to something else. It was difficult to wrap my head around for this one. I'm used to seeing them on like large scale environments. Yeah, like if I would like recommend you to use a trim sheet, it would be, you bring up like big environments, right? Take one building of those environments and build it with a trim sheet. That's it. Or one asset and build it with a trim sheet. Trim sheet only. Right? And then you can start seeing like, oh, I can do this with trim sheets and this is how I need to build them. And it also gives you the context of like how much stuff that you need. Right? And then this is no longer going to be a question mark, but it's going to be like, I've run into this before, so let me try something new on top of it, right? So yeah, keep it simple. Because you're already going to be learning a lot about like different techniques, right? Like how to make something look good with tidables, vertex painting, decals, all that kind of stuff. And just go for like higher quality. And if you want to learn something, just, do it on the side and do it small. So from now on, working on tidables and unique. Yep. That's the way that I would do it. Yeah. Thank you, Harry. I know that was probably not like the expected outcome, but I think if we didn't have that conversation around it, we would have had to have that conversation in a couple of weeks and we would have been like way worse off. So I think just go with what you're comfortable with and focus on like achieving the best result. Making it look kick-ass, you know? And then investigate trim sheets on the side with like a little prop. Could be cool. Cool. Paulina is next. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I was getting stressful and I wanted to focus on other areas, so needed that. Thank you. Yeah, so this is the difficult thing about... I had that feeling, right? Like in the beginning, I had that feeling once I saw that like breakdown of the trim sheet that there was struggling, like there was stress and struggle involved as well. But sometimes it's really difficult because I'm basically going on assumptions, right? I assume that might be happening, but you might also be like, huh? What is that? No, I'm totally fine. So yeah, I'm glad it worked out, Harry. Let's see. Next up for Paulina. There's two parts here. So one is the material. I finally both tested the clay and the wooden planks materials in the actual scene. That is freaking awesome. That is, yeah, that's amazing. So that is really good. We're talking about this one over here. Sorry. So the plaster is in Nice. Okay, so this gives us like a way better indication of what the actual material looks like, right? That's great. And you got the wooden planks in as well. Also looking interesting. So first we'll start with the wooden planks. Let me know if there's anything that I can improve on these two materials. We don't really have like a good close-up of the plaster, but honestly, from just like a distant read, like from looking at this distance, it's really good, right? Because, well, what the ideal result is for a plaster is that we can lay like a foundation and then we add like additional details on top of it with decals or vertex paint or all that kind of stuff. So this serves as like a really good foundational thing that we can then build upon with extra layers, right? So I think great job on the plaster. So the plaster works really well because now that you got it into the engine, right? The next steps is basically, okay, what does that mean if I wanna take like the plaster to the next level? What additional layers do I need, right? And then, oh, okay, so that's Paulina. I was thinking to add details like more dust, leaks, and cracks with decals. Yeah, that is awesome. Keep in mind also vertex painting. It would be nice to have the plaster that you have now, which works really nice as a base, and then I would have like a more damaged or worn kind of plaster, and then you can use those two and just like paint between the two of them, and that's gonna look really good. That is great stuff. On the wood side of things, though, I think you're having issues with your normal. Or it might be a texture issue. So the reason why I say that, right? I'll explain my thinking. The sun comes in from the right. And what we expect it to be, so this is like a wooden beam, and we're going to exaggerate, right? This is what's happening on the wooden planks. So we expect the shadow to be on this side. But what is happening is that it's lighter on this side. And it's darker on this side. Right? So we're actually getting the inverse reaction of what we expect, right? So it looks like this is a lip that kind of comes up, instead of it going down like we expect. And that is usually a sign of flip normals. So that's something to keep in mind. But the texture itself looks quite nice though. Same thing, once you're going to investigate like all the vertex painting and stuff, that is going to be cool, because what you can do with vertex painting on these wooden planks, for example, is you can have a... he said the thing? Huh? What did I say? Oh, no. What was I going to say? No. Distracted now. So, on to flip normals riff. So what you can do on the planks here is... make a second texture that is like more dirty, more grimy, whatever, and then you can again paint in between them. And what is really cool about that is, let's say you have like a more worn version, then you can start indicating where people walk. Right? So these sections, they would be like more worn, like maybe even like under the bed, right? Like that's more worn, like around these sides, like that's all going to be more worn. And it's going to create like this beautiful contrast of these darker planks onto the side, and this more walked on like flooring in between it. And it's going to look sick. And then add decals and all that stuff on top of it. It's going to look awesome. So yeah, nice, solid base. So the second thing was we're creating a vertical slice. So a vertical slice needs to be done by the 7th of March, which is not a lot of time. So you got a little over a week. What a vertical slice usually means is that we want to benchmark core elements in a small section, right? And then that benchmark word is really important, because once we have that benchmark, that's how we're going to build the rest of the scene. So now we got the context. Now we need to define what that's going to mean for this scene, right? You're already working on like a chest here. Where's that chest going to be? I'm assuming it's going to be there. In your case, what I would do as a vertical slice, let's see. And I chose to work on a model from this old chest. Could you please let me know what I can improve on and what I should focus on when texturing? Maybe you would also be able to advise me on how to approach the presentation of a vertical slice as well. So in your case, what you want to showcase is you want to have a snippet of like all the components of your scene, right? That's what we talked about, like all the core elements. So all the things you talked about. So in your case, your vertical slice is going to mean one unique asset. That's going to be your chest, right? So that's a chest. You want to have your titleables. So that's the floor. That's the floor and the clay, right? Or the plaster. And then number 3 is basically anything that needs to come on top of that, right? So that means vertex paint, decals, and then I don't know what the recommendations are from the school or from the course or whatever, but there might be like another asset involved. So that's a question mark. But yeah, if we just have these 3, right, we know that we can make the scene. Well, to be fair, is there something else in the scene? This is the thing that worries me, though. This big thing. It's not that I'm worried about like the future. It's more we should ideally include that in the vertical slice, because that is going to be a different kind of prop. You have to think about it in a different way, where most of the other assets you can just do unique, right? And that's how you're doing like this asset as well. This asset is so big that it's gonna put your skills to the test way more than like a chest does. So yeah, that's just my opinion there. But like if you want to benchmark like all the other stuff in the scene, so you have like a chest, you have the titleables, the vertex paint, all that kind of stuff set up. What you then have is like, if this is a course, or let's assume you're in uni or whatever, you can then be, or let's assume like a professional setting, right? Like what you want to do in games is you can then showcase that to your publisher or to your to the main studio and just be like, hey, this is the quality that we're going to be putting on this project. That's what we're gunning for, and this is how we're going to execute on it. So they basically just want to see like, is this doable, right? And do you know how to do it as a studio in this case? So yeah. And what should you improve on, or what should I focus on when texturing? Honestly, yeah, it's small details, like lots of layers, and pay attention to like the small details. There's so much richness in, I don't have like the references here, but there's so much richness in the references that you have added that you need to be able to capture those as well. So that's what, if I'm like your, let's say I'm your business partner, right? Let's say I'm the main studio and you do outsource for me. Like that is what I'm going to be paying attention to, especially if it's like important to the scene, right? Like I want you to like just nail like all those details. That attention to detail is going to be really important. And then, oh yeah, the presentation for the vertical slice. I would honestly do something really simple. Right, so you have like a corner of your room. You have your unique asset, right, which is like number 1. You have your titleables, so like you have the floor and the wall. So you just put like the chest in the corner somewhere. And then I want to see like some really cool vertex painting and like some cool decals on the floor so that we can see like the dust underneath the chest. Maybe there's like some cracks in the walls. Like that's what I would do. Very simple, very straightforward, to the point, because you only got 1 week, right? So I would just do something like that and then present it really nicely. That's what I would do. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask. Of course you're allowed to ask anything. Any good courses or resources to study environment design? Because I kind of feel like lost for a beginner / mid-level. I mean, Tiago Klavka's courses has been like highly recommended, and I've seen a lot of people go through that one. But it's stylized, so I don't know if that's like a thing. There are really good courses on ArtStation though. There's one about environment production that basically takes you through like the beginning until all the way to the end, which is really good. I can recommend that one, and it's free. I mean, I don't know if it's free. I don't know if you need to be like a member or something like that now, but yeah, that's the one that I would definitely recommend. But yeah, if you have to be careful. I'm already a little bit scared of the use of the word design, because even the word design means something completely different. Because usually there's a split between level design and environment art, right? Like environment art are the people who make the things pretty. Level design are the people who make things function. So there's already like a split there. I've seen a few I'm wanting to take on the Gnomon workshop. Oh, it's been ages since I looked there. It's been ages. But yeah, if you want to share those in the Discord, Connor, that would be really cool. Because I have no clue. Like it's something that I'm really unaware of, actually. But yeah, going back to this, thank you so much, Paulina. Thank you for sharing your work. Yeah, best of luck. And then we've got the last one for today. So Vasia is working on the underground clinic. Andrew is given a whole bunch of good feedback, so that's awesome, Andrew. That's amazing to see. I'd like to ask feedback and advice on the textures of the meshes. All the meshes on the single screenshot use the same texture. Oh, okay, so like this one uses the same textures. Yeah, cool. The color of the texture, I'm not sure of some of them, especially with the robot hands in the context of the scene and lighting. Yeah, that's the most important thing that matters, right? Those feel like really clean at the moment. I mean, environment art, sorry. No, it's fine. It's fine. I just want to be like very clear about like terminology, right? Because sometimes you have people come in that might not even know the difference yet. and then I don't want to steer them on like the wrong path. So yeah, when you escape Zebra's jail, Connor, let me know. Yeah, cool. So I think you hit on something really cool here, right, Fasia? Is that you want to be paying attention to the context of the scene. That's the most important part here. So if you think like, hey, this doesn't look good, try to figure out, right? Like I feel like my initial thing is the whole scene is broken down, kind of grimy, you know, like there's broken tiles, there's a destroyed wall, all that kind of stuff happening. And then you have like these almost pristine looking like robot arms. So it's too clean. That's what I would say for the robot arms and potentially some of the other textures as well. Let's have a look. We are getting some really nice like surface highlights here though. Like some really nice roughness response, so that's cool. Love that. So that's really nice. Dink. Now let's add a heart. Come on. So that's pretty cool. So I think overall, it's really good, right? You just need to do that like extra layer of making it like dirty and grimy on top of it. And then, yeah, you can do so much stuff, right? You're doing the cables as like a separate thing, I'm assuming. That is cool. I was just looking at like the options that we have here. Because what I was thinking is that, cool, these cables also look new, right? What if we just like patch some of them up with like a little bit of tape or something? Right, so that we're giving like a little bit of life to this place in like the small details. And those details matter, right? So having like a bunch of like rotating scratches on these arms, that could be really cool. Even like fading away like the logo. Right? And it's about those things are like they really matter a lot. So having like oil buildup here, maybe some oil buildup here. Getting those scratches on there, scratches up here. Yeah, you can do a lot with that stuff. Just having like dirt and grime. We actually have, if you're a member of our workshop tier, the workshop that we did with Abbas Kiani was actually really good for this sort of stuff. Like really paying attention to like the small little details. All the cables in the pipes use a trim sheet. That's fine. So play with the cables texture roughness. No. I'm talking about like an actual like physical like piece of tape or something like that. It doesn't even, if you really want to be dirty, you can honestly just use the same sort of material, just tint it slightly different and just wrap it around it like it's like a little piece of separate pipe or something like that, right? Because what they usually do to fix like pipes up, right, is, let's say you have like, my cable, oh, my cable is destroyed. Shit. And you have like all this exposed wire. What they usually do is they slide like a bigger tube on top of it. They slide it over here. And then they just blast down with like hot air so that it like shrinks around like onto the tube, but it has like a slightly different color, right? Because you're not going to get like the exact same tube. So that sort of stuff, right? Like even just getting like a little piece of like tube on top of that, that can already look like, oh, someone did some repairs on this machine. It's not brand new, right? So yeah, dirt and grime, that's gonna look good. I mean, especially if you're gonna do this stuff. Come on, that doesn't look nice. But yeah, that's the main thing. I know it's very early days for the environment itself, right? But you can already apply those things and maybe even think back to what we said with Paulina's work, right? Do like a benchmark. Set the benchmark of like, hey, to be honest, like these robotic arms are going to be the most important part of the scene anyway. So try to get them as good as looking, as good looking as you can, and then set the benchmark for the rest of the assets if needed. Because if this asset is going to look the best, that also makes sense, right? Because it's the focal point of the scene, so it needs to look the best, together with the chair, of course. But yeah, those things, they're definitely going to stand out, and that's where you want to put like the most attention. Yeah. In the end, and at the end, how do the meshes look in my scene with those textures? Should I change some things? I would not necessarily change anything now. I would just keep it going and keep tweaking over time. So I would definitely do like an additional texture pass on the mechanical arms, because then you know that like, okay, that's the quality part that I want to hit. And then the rest of the scene, I would just keep going and do incremental changes and keep making it better and better and better. That's what I would do. Because I also don't necessarily want to focus you on like, oh, this doesn't look good. I want you to spend like more time on this now. Because it doesn't matter to the scene, right? Like what is important is this stuff. Right? That's what's important to the scene. And even, well, just the robotic arms and like the chair itself are the most important stuff, and then like the floor detail under here, right? And if you're going to do decals and all that kind of stuff, that is the most important part of the scene. With the rest of the assets, you can cut corners if you need to. That's why we want to focus on the focal point first, and then cut corners if we can on the other stuff. Yeah. The blood buckets scare me. I will have bad dreams now. Sorry. It's probably something that you'll unfortunately have to get used to, because yeah. We tend to have some like pretty interesting ideas when it comes to environmental storytelling. Let me put it that way. Yeah, Louise is saying it looks really good already. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, I hope that was helpful, Kovalinsky. And thank you for putting up your work. I know I don't go into a lot of detail. I feel like if you wanna get into like a really actual like texturing advice, there's a bunch of like YouTube videos for that, I feel. I tend to mostly focus on the bigger picture and actually tying everything together rather than individual like texturing advice. That's not where my strengths lie, honestly. That's also, yeah. You can tell that by the way that I talk about environments, right? It's like, okay, this is important. The rest we can skip corners on, because I don't want you to spend like a bunch of time on all that kind of stuff, right? I'm more about like the effectiveness of like how to build a full scene, rather than, oh, every prop needs to have like the highest amount of detail. So yeah, thank you so much. Let's see, what else do we have in the chat here? Minus my existing knowledge. Oh shit, I missed that, and I don't know what it's about. But yeah, Adam is saying, oh, this scene looks awesome. Yeah, I agree. It looks great. Oh, and another shout out to Andrew Little in the chat, or like in the community chat. He's giving some really good advice. Some really, really good advice. So yeah, thanks so much, Andrew. Thank you for doing that. Cool. 2 hours. I am going to leave it there. I'm going to say thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure for giving you this feedback. And just, it's always a pleasure to look at like really cool stuff that everyone's making. So great stuff, everyone. Keep up the great work. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. You're very welcome, Harry.